Hi guys, I'm Gasha. Welcome to the channel and welcome, as always, to our coffee times to talk horror books. As you can see, I'm kind of still rearranging the background, moving things around, trying to optimize space. So my background is going to be changing from video to video maybe. I'm sorry if that bothers some people, but you know, I'm working on it. So today I am here to let you know some of my favorite reads of 2021.
It's coffee time!
Now, my approach on favorite books or books that I give like higher ratings to is a little bit different to what it was when I started on booktube. You know, I think before I was a little bit more focused on books that had these amazing intricate stories or that had something extremely you know, fresh and new, or things that were written wonderfully or had this amazing prose, had like these big words and fantastic sentences. And with time I realized that my favorites can also be just a book that made me like feel so engaged with the characters, a book that had something that touched me in a different level emotionally, maybe a book that unexpectedly I had to binge in one night because I just could not put it down. And it doesn't matter if the book didn't have like the most amazing writing style. Maybe for me it is a 5 coffee mug rating. So I guess I'm just trying to do it a little bit more subjectively, I guess, and also, you know, just acknowledge those books that brought me joy, that made me feel maybe young again, that made me reconnect with something from my past, or you know, books that took me on a journey personally, emotionally, because I can relate to them, things like that. I don't know, I hope you guys understand what I mean. But so these 10 books are just books that one way or another really touched me, surprised me, made me fall in love with the characters, or they had a twist that I didn't see coming and it totally blew me away, stuff like that. So the list is in no particular order. All of these books have either a 4.5 or a 5 rating on my Goodreads. So these are all books that I would recommend you guys. I'm aware that most of these books you probably heard me talking about before, because I tend to really get excited about books that I love and keep mentioning them. So these are gonna be 10 books that you've probably heard me raving about before, but let's get into it. First, let's talk a book that I know I keep mentioning all the time, but that is Mina and the Undead by Amy McCall, because this is one of those scenarios where I picked up this book just based on a recommendation from Amazon, I believe, and I just bought it because I thought, oh, it's YA, it has vampires, maybe it's fun. And I really didn't know anything about this book. Apart from that, I hadn't seen anybody talking about it, and I even decided to vlog the experience of reading this book. And I know that it motivated a lot of other people to pick it up, which I'm glad, because this was just kind of a throwback to my teenage years when I used to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer with my dad, or those kind of things, you know, or the Scooby-Doo gang, something like that. And I absolutely went on for the ride. I flew through the book. It is really fast-paced. It's full of amazing action moments. And this is, you know, in some ways also a book about teenagers, so there's going to be a couple of tropes and things that you might expect in a YA story, but it is done so well that the horror is predominant above everything else, which I really appreciated. And it's full of horror references that I also appreciated as a horror nerd. So in this story, we follow Mina. She goes to visit her sister Libby in New Orleans, and Libby works in kind of like a mansion where people go to get scared. And then things start to get a little bit out of control when there is these vampires that appear in New Orleans. So this book is getting also a sequel this year, so I will be rereading it. I really recommend it for people that are looking for a fun, fast-paced slasher book with vampires. It is really the perfect book to binge as well, and I do believe that this would help people also that are probably on a reading slump. Moving on, we have The Sunken Motel by Simone St. James, And this one I also picked up because I saw a lot of people talking about it, and I had not read the author's previous thriller, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. This is told in two different perspectives, and I tend to love that dual perspective in books if it's done correctly. And this follows the story of two different generations of women that are both looking for answers in this Sunken Motel. The Sunken Motel has the reputation, bad reputation, of people disappearing, going missing after they go into this hotel. And we follow two women, like I said. We follow Viv in the 80s and we follow Carly in 2017, and they're both looking for answers in this hotel. And the whole atmosphere of the hotel, the whole investigation that takes place trying to figure out what happens to people that disappear at this hotel, I absolutely loved it. And it felt also so much like a true crime story to me that I was just there for the ride. Absolutely one of my favorite books that I read last year, and I am really excited that the author has a new book also coming out this year. And this, I know it's not going to be for everybody. I guess most people have a problem with the two different characters' perspective, but I absolutely loved it if you're looking for a great thriller. Brainchild by Andrew Neidemann, and this one is one that you need to be a little bit patient with because it is a slow burner at the beginning, but for me, my opinion, it does pay off at the end. And this book follows a girl whose interest in science might lead her to some darker paths, might lead her to perform some experiments that are a little bit unconventional. And this kind of reminded me, I've said it before and I know some people found it funny, but it's kind of like Sheldon in a way made horror because this girl is really good at science. She's extremely smart, she knows what she's doing, and she's using that knowledge for things that are a little bit evilish. I had a lot of fun with it, but like I said, it is a fairly slow pace at the beginning, so it depends if that might be your jam or not. Come With Me by Ronald Malfi, and I'm gonna be completely honest, I didn't know the author. I saw this on NetGalley. The plot sounded interesting, so I decided to request it at NetGalley and read it. And I was like ashamed that I have never read anything by this author before because it was just such an amazing story. It was a great horror story, but also adding a lot of supernatural elements, some elements about grief in horror. I absolutely loved it. I loved it. So now I have to read everything else by the author, who also happens to have a new book coming out in 2022. So we are being blessed. In this story we follow Aaron, and he unexpectedly one day loses his wife Allison at a shooting, and after that he starts grieving and going through the house, through the things that they had, and he makes a discovery. He finds a box with some things from Allison that leave him wondering if he really actually knew his wife or not, and that takes him on a journey to try to discover what Allison was actually doing whenever she left the house. And this is so unexpected and it's just so engaging. Also another great thriller if you guys specifically love grief combined with horror. Next we have True Crime by Samantha Kolesnik, and man, I received this book as a present from the lovely Leslie from The Nerdy Narrative, and I went into it expecting a true crime story because I thought that was what I was gonna get, but man, was this a roller coaster. This follows two siblings that escape an abusive family, and they end up running, and they end up on a killing spree while they're running away. And I can say this has a trigger warning for absolutely everything. It is disgusting, it is intense, it is gory, and I loved it. I kind of was sad that it was so short because I would have loved to explore everything that happened, but with more pages, you know, with more exploration of the situations, of the places that they went, the people that they met. But it was extremely intense, it was fast-paced, absolutely loved every page. Something that I could reread anytime as well. And I just recently got her newest book. It's also a novella, so I am super excited to get to that one in 2022. Moving on, we have Later by Stephen King, and this one was one of my favorites because it was fast-paced and it felt a little bit more Stephen King than some of his other newer thrillers. I would still say this is more thriller than horror, but it does have some supernatural elements to it. And this follows Jamie. He is a kid that is able to see the dead, and he can see them with the clothes that they were wearing when they died, and he can kind of tell what happened to them by the way they look, you know, maybe shot in the head, maybe, you know, use your imagination. And his mom is struggling financially, and she also realizes one day that Jamie has this power and tells him to keep it quiet, to keep it a secret from other people. Now, a lot of the book is told, I think all of it actually is told from the perspective of the kid as he is growing up. And for me, what really sold the story to me is how incredibly talented Stephen King is with his writing, because I could totally feel the difference. I thought this was told from the perspective of a kid, and as he was growing up, I was understanding that he was growing up telling the story. It was just insanity to me. Like, I just love the writing so much in this book. And I love the supernatural elements to it. You know, it's a classic story, somebody that can see the dead, you know, that doesn't sound extremely original or anything, but I was just here for the ride. I loved every minute of it, and I still recommend it if you want to pick it up. I do think it's a decent first Stephen King read if you've never read Stephen King before. Now, it's nothing like his classics from back in the day, but I feel like from his latest ones, like from the last 4 or 5 years, I feel like this one is a great one for people that want to just start reading a little bit of Stephen King. Now let's talk about one of my new favorite horror authors that started his career not that long ago, and that is Eric LaRocca. Things have gotten worse since we last spoke. This novella, I'm probably sure you guys have seen people raving about it. Twitter went mad about it, and honestly, it deserves every little bit of hype that it has received. If you have not picked it up yet, I mean, you're really missing out, okay? This probably has been one of my favorite things that I have ever read. Like, this story was so intense and disturbing. I sat down to read this novella thinking, I'll read a little bit and maybe come back later and finish it. I didn't. I stopped everything I had to do that day, and I finished this novella in one sitting. Eric LaRocca has this beautiful way of writing stories. Like, his writing is just poetic at times, but his stories are so extremely dark and uncomfortable to read at times. And this one explores kind of the dangers of meeting strangers in social media, through the internet, and explores a little bit all of that. And I have to tell you, this has been so far my favorite of his. He has a new one coming out this year, and I have received an advanced copy of that one. You bet I'm gonna read that ASAP. Now let's talk about a book that was really, really gory and intense, and another one that I just couldn't put it down. I kept reading, and I was in a little bit of a slump, and this one absolutely took me out of that reading slump, and that is The Perfect Victim by David Sodergren. This is an amazing gory slasher, and that is what it is. That is the magic of this book. It doesn't try to be anything else than that, and it succeeds. It's just majestic. I loved it. The story just seems simple. You know, we have a girl that is kidnapped because her father is a famous Hollywood producer, so the kidnappers just want to get some money out of him for the rescue. But things start to get south, and the kidnappers start to get violent with the girl, and yeah, I guess you can imagine the rest. But only going to this one, checking all the trigger warnings. I'm gonna put trigger warnings in the description down below, because this one gets really intense and it's really gory, so it's only for people that can really stomach all of that. So I just want to put it out there. But David Sodergren is another one of my authors that it's an out-of-buy author, since I read The Forgotten Island, and honestly an underrated author. The next book doesn't need much of an explanation because I feel like everybody knows this story, and that is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. A lot of people have been reading this book in 2021, and I also saw somebody reading it. I think it was Brad Copter, the first one that I saw reading it, and I decided to pick it up myself because I've always been a huge fan of the film, since it was one of my very first horror movies that I ever watched on VHS, so it's always had a place in my heart, and I was afraid of picking up the book because I love the movie so much. But I can tell you the book is totally worth it if you love the movie, or also if you've never seen the movie. It is fantastic. It is so fast-paced for being an older book. Normally those tend to be a little bit more dry, but this one was nothing like that. It was also a lot more emotional than I expected, and it is beautifully written. The story is fairly simple. You guys know it follows Regan. She's a girl that starts to exhibit some weird behavior, and her mom starts to fear that maybe she might be possessed, and she asks for help to a priest, and you know what happens, kind of. But the book, of course, it's different from the film. However, I loved both so much. And last but absolutely not least, we have Autumn Crow by Cameron Chaney. And this one made it to my list because it just brought me back to that real Halloween feel, especially this last year, 2021, where I wasn't really able to celebrate Halloween because I was packing and busy about my move. So this one just gave me that cozy vibe that I needed. Another reason why I picked this one as one of my favorites is that I really loved every single story that is in this book, which is not always the case when you have short story compilations. It doesn't matter if they're by the same author or by different authors. Sometimes you just love some more than others, and I absolutely loved all of these. And another reason why is that all the stories take place in Autumn Crow Valley, Ohio, and I love when books have, or authors have, their own kind of universe and everything is interconnected, which is what happens with Cameron Chaney's books. He's connecting all of these stories, and they're all interconnected and taking place in the same small place, the small town. And I just absolutely love that. I love when authors can connect the dots between stories, between characters. Everything has kind of the same universe. I'm a sucker for that. So that's another reason why I absolutely love this, and I am so excited to pick up Autumn Crow High as soon as it's released, which is going to be his new series. So yeah, another one that I absolutely recommend, especially if you're looking for some nice October reads for this Halloween. Alright you guys, so these were 10 books that were the 10 books that I enjoyed the most, that I had the most fun with, or some that surprised me because I had never read that author and they just blew me away. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. I know some of these books I've mentioned a couple of times before, but let me know down below which are your favorite horror reads from 2021, the ones that you found maybe just more entertaining. It doesn't have to be the one that was perfectly written. Let's talk about our favorite horror books that we read in 2021 in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I hope to see you all in our next coffee time. Bye!